if I'm not stretching your patience too much, I would like to go back to the original question that I asked about philosophy as a way of life by commenting, if there are any, on some ethical doctrines that are distinctly Buddhist, and if there are, what connections they bear with the other metaphysical, ontological doctrines that we have discussed.
Yeah. Okay, so how to live is upfront and central right at the beginning of Buddhism. That's exactly what the Four Noble Truths are all about. So it's one of these big questions. It's absolutely central to Buddhism. How should you live? Well, you should live in such a way as to try and rid yourself of the dukkha in your life. And if you're a Mahayana, tell everybody else to do that. How do you do that? Well, that takes us to the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, namely the Eightfold Noble Paths. And there's this slate of 8 things which are going to help you in this regard. They fall into 3 groups. The 8 fall into 3 groups. One is roughly like cognitive, understanding the world. One is what a Western philosophy would regard as ethical, sort of ethical guidelines. And one is sometimes classed as wisdom. It's to do with sort of mindfulness and concentration and so on. And if you look at the ones that are obviously ethical to a Western philosopher, you're not going to get any surprises. Okay, right action, right speech, right livelihood. Right action, let's take that last. Right livelihood, don't make a living by making others suffer. Standard examples, don't work in a slaughterhouse, but just extrapolate to 21st century society. You can think of lots of these things, right? Right speech, don't be hurtful, be honest, etc. And right action. Right action is the most general because earning your livelihood and speaking are, of course, actions. But, the standard examples are don't murder, don't steal. Okay, so these are things which you will find in virtually any ethical code, Eastern or Western, religious or secular. So there's nothing very exciting there if you're looking for originality. What I think does distinguish Buddhism is that if you're a Buddhist, you won't think of those 3 ethical things as really distinctive in any way. They're all about procedures employed in living a good life and understanding the world, being mindful of what's going on around you, not being hurtful. These are all parts of the same big picture. So there's a debate in sort of Western Buddhist scholarship at the moment how you actually understand Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist ethics rather. The Buddhist Western ethicists tend to divide ethical theories into 3 kinds. Consequentialist, look at the consequences, deontological, look at the rules, and virtue ethics, look at the virtues of being a good person. And people debate whether you should fit Buddhist ethics into any of these things. And the answer is really that you shouldn't, I think. You get aspects of all 3 of those things, but if you just look at the Eightfold Noble Path, the ethics really comprises all of the 8 parts of the Eightfold Noble Path, and that's not going to fit comfortably into any Western ethical view. Okay, so does this relate to metaphysical issues? Not immediately in very obvious ways. simply because Buddhists have a number of different, Buddhist schools have a number of very different metaphysical views. We've talked about some of them, but that's only sort of a start. There are lots of others. So there are many very different Buddhist metaphysical views, but generally speaking, the ethics is pretty common. Certainly the Four Noble Truths are pretty common. So there isn't going to be a tight connection between ethics and particular Buddhist metaphysical views. There's going to be a sort of very general connection, simply because one of the sort of widely accepted Buddhist metaphysical principles is interdependence. It goes by the name Pratitya Samutpada in Sanskrit. So everything that happens is related to many, many other things that happened and are going to happen, cause and effect. Emptiness is just a kind of generalization of this. So when you do things, you have to bear in mind that the consequence is going to ramify. They're going to affect you, they're going to affect everybody else. And so if you're thinking about what you should do, then you better be aware of all the sort of consequences that your actions have for yourself and for other people. In other words, you should be mindful. So mindfulness is one of the Eightfold Noble Path. So there are kind of very general connections of this kind. But it's harder to tap on things which are more specific.
I was asking because in many Western cultures, the idea of diminishing the importance of the self is a central part of an ethical life. And I was thinking if an entire culture which does without the self altogether, and the exercise that understanding how this illusion works, which is part of it, if this doesn't go in that direction in any way.
Well, the first noble truth is right view, understand the world. If you have illusions about the world, that's not great. You should try and get rid of these illusions. So that's certainly there. That's, of course, a very general epistemological, ethical principle. Understand the world in which you live.
In Western cultures, we make a big deal of self-interest as hampering an ethical life.
Sure.
And this is a way of reformulating my question. Okay, what is the relation between the doctrine of the illusion of the self and self-interest, or lack of self-interest, for that matter?
So remember that this word self is ambiguous, and often it just means person. Okay, and ethics is about people. So Buddhist ethics is about how people should behave, right? To that extent, it's independent of the question. I mean, the question of anatman is not relevant here because you're dealing with people, not selves. In particular, self-interest is to do with people putting their own interests first, okay? Sometimes you hear people say, if you've got no self, you can't be selfish, which is a good thing. That, I'm afraid, is a misunderstanding.
I suppose that was my misunderstanding.
Okay, yeah, so being selfish has to do with putting your person first, okay? It's got nothing to do with having no self in the Buddhist sense. But having a disillusion of self is not a great idea, just because what anatman is a denial. Let me put it the other way around. Anatman means that you are constituted by the causal network in which you find yourself. Now, we come back to the bit of graph theory. So if you don't understand that and how causes and effects change people, and yourself included and other people, then you ain't going to get on very well in the world. You're going to do disastrous things, both to yourself and other people. So a belief in the self is pernicious because it means you fundamentally misunderstand the world and what that's going to affect the way you behave in the world.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Emiliano. Ciao, ciao.
Have a good week. Ciao, ciao. Ciao.
And you.